The police who went inside said room to room were stacked with guns. So the question is, what was the owner doing with them?
What if one of the most dangerous weapons stashes in America wasn't hidden in a desert bunker or a cartel compound, but sitting quietly in a normal neighborhood where kids ride their bikes every afternoon? When federal agents kicked down the door of a modest home in Washington state, they expected a routine drug bust, something small, contained. What they found instead made seasoned officers stop in their tracks. Room after room wasn't filled with furniture or family photos, but with firepower, enough to supply a private army, enough to turn a quiet street into a war zone overnight. And that's when investigators realized this wasn't just about one house or even one city. This was part of something far bigger, an invisible network moving weapons, poison, and money across the country in plain sight. A system so efficient, so embedded, that most Americans would never see it coming until it was too late.
More than 1,000 guns, rifles, and pistols were stacked on the street and across the sidewalk.
You never know what goes on behind these gates. It's a lot of weapons.
The house didn't stand out. No boarded windows, no guards, no warning sign. Just another quiet property tucked into a normal Washington neighborhood. The kind of place people walk past every day without a second thought. But for months, federal agents had been watching. Something about the activity didn't add up. Too many short visits, cars coming and going at strange hours, patterns that didn't belong in a sleepy suburban street. Still, no one was prepared for what waited inside. When the door finally came down, the first room stopped them cold. Then the second, then the third. Every space they entered told the same story. Guns stacked, leaning against walls, packed into corners. Rifles, pistols, high-powered weapons. Enough firepower to overwhelm a small police department. Veteran officers later said it felt unreal, like walking into a warehouse instead of a home. This wasn't personal protection. This wasn't a collector's hobby. This was inventory. And that's when the most unsettling realization set in. From the outside, nothing looked wrong. Neighbors had no idea they were living next to what amounted to an armed command post. Kids rode bikes past it. Families walked their dogs by it, all while behind closed doors, something far more dangerous was taking shape. But the weapons were only the beginning. As agents pushed deeper into the house, the situation went from disturbing to downright terrifying. This wasn't just a weapon stash. It was a production line. Hidden alongside the guns were massive quantities of narcotics, bags of meth, thousands of fentanyl pills. And then came the detail that made investigators exchange looks. Industrial equipment designed to turn raw ingredients into pills at an almost unbelievable speed, thousands an hour. No street dealer needs that. This wasn't about feeding a local habit. This was large-scale distribution, the kind that poisons entire communities before anyone realizes what's happened. But what really set off alarms was the combination. Drugs on this level usually mean one thing: violence follows. And violence becomes inevitable when firepower is this accessible. The weapons weren't there by accident. They were insurance, enforcement, protection for an operation that had clearly outgrown the shadows. Agents later described the house as something closer to a factory than a home, a place designed for efficiency, not living. Every piece had a purpose. Every room served a function. And that raised a chilling question. If this was just one location, how many others were out there doing the exact same thing right now?
Officers then searched his home and found guns, more than a pound of methamphetamine, 1,000 fentanyl pills, as well as ingredients and a pill press that can make thousands of pills an hour.
It didn't take long for investigators to realize this house wasn't acting alone. The raid had barely wrapped up when teams across western Washington started moving in sync. At the same moment doors were coming down in Centralia, law enforcement was hitting properties in other cities, places that on the surface looked just as ordinary. Different addresses, different faces, same operation, same pattern. Some of the suspects weren't hiding at all. They blended in perfectly. One man was stopped during what looked like a routine drive, the kind of traffic stop that usually ends with a warning and a wait. Instead, officers uncovered kilograms of fentanyl sitting inside the vehicle, quietly traveling through public roads like any other commuter. Another search led to yet more drugs and a loaded handgun sitting close by. It was a reminder that this network wasn't stationary. It moved, it adapted, and it stayed armed at all times. What made it even more unsettling was how invisible it all was. These weren't shadowy figures lurking in alleyways. These were people living normal lives, driving normal cars, passing through everyday spaces, while moving enough poison and firepower to devastate entire neighborhoods. And that's when authorities gave the operation operation a name that hinted at just how serious this threat had become.
What started as a traffic stop ended with all of these guns and prescription pills off the streets. This is what police found after randomly running the plates on a car parked outside a bar.
Authorities called it Operation Take Back America. It sounds dramatic, almost cinematic, but the name reflected a hard truth. This wasn't a small cleanup. It was an attempt to rip out a network that had quietly embedded itself deep inside U.S. communities. Investigators said the suspects weren't low-level dealers or random middlemen. These were key connectors, people moving narcotics, money, and weapons across county lines with precision, the kind of structure you expect from a corporation, not a street crew. What shocked many agents was the direction of the flow. Drugs were coming north, just like everyone assumes, but the guns? They were heading south. High-powered American firearms purchased or acquired here were being funneled toward criminal groups that thrive on violence across the border. That's why the weapons mattered more than the cash. $40,000 was seized during the raids, but in cartel math, that's nothing. The real value was in the rifles, the high-capacity magazines, and the ability to arm enforcers whenever and wherever they were needed. And yet, even after all the seizures, one question refused to go away. Who were these weapons really meant for? Gangs? Cartels? Or something even more organized? Investigators admitted they didn't have all the answers yet. What they did know was this: Washington State was only one piece of a much larger map, and when they followed the trail, it led them clear across the country.
They're trying to figure out exactly what this person or this organization was doing with the weapons. I asked if these were being sold to gangs or somebody else, if this was terror-related. All of that is still under investigation at this point. They're not certain.
That trail led straight to the East Coast, along a route law enforcement knows all too well. They call it the Iron Pipeline, a steady stream of guns moving from states with looser regulations into major cities with stricter ones. Usually, it's small-time traffickers running a few weapons at a time. This case was different. In May of 2025, federal and city authorities announced the arrest of a 31-year-old man named David Morris. Investigators say he was transporting firearms from Georgia all the way up to Lower Manhattan, treating the journey like a delivery route. No rush, no fear, just business. Undercover officers spent weeks building trust, posing as buyers. During that time, Morris allegedly sold them multiple weapons in plain daylight, near the waterfront, as if nothing about the exchange was unusual. But what really alarmed agents wasn't the sales. It was what he claimed he could provide next. Morris reportedly bragged about having access to conversion devices, small, almost unnoticeable pieces that can turn a regular handgun into a fully automatic weapon. With one of those installed, a pistol can unload an entire magazine in seconds. Precision disappears. Chaos takes over. He also claimed he'd been in the gun trade for nearly a decade. That kind of experience doesn't come from chance. It comes from demand. And the demand, investigators say, was coming from places far more dangerous than the streets of New York. Because as they dug deeper into Morris's operation, they realized this pipeline wasn't just feeding cities. It was fueling something much bigger.
As you can see, the weapons are of all makes and calibers and models, and there's over 1,000. This is a big stash, you may kind of say, that's beyond just beyond comprehension.
When authorities finally moved in, the full scope of the operation became impossible to ignore. Tables were lined wall to wall with seized weapons, rifles of every style, high-capacity firearms built for sustained fire, ammunition stacked so high it looked more like a military depot than an evidence room. This wasn't someone flipping a few guns on the side. This was volume, the kind that changes the balance of power the moment it hits the street. Investigators also uncovered hidden cash, hundreds of thousands of dollars packed away in buckets and crawl spaces. Not flashy, just stored and ready to be.
Police raided that home Tuesday and says the cash was behind this wall in the attic, packed in orange Home Depot buckets, 150 grand in each bucket. A loaded Tech-9 firearm was also taken from the home.
In this world, money doesn't sit still for long. And here's the part most people don't realize. Cartels don't just smuggle drugs into the US. They use that profit to buy American weapons, legally or through intermediaries, and then send them back across the border. It's a cycle that feeds itself. Poison funds firepower. Firepower protects poison. Straw purchasers play a key role in this. People with clean records buying guns on behalf of someone else, knowing exactly exactly where those weapons are headed. On paper, everything looks legal. In reality, the damage begins the moment the transfer happens. As prosecutors stacked charges against Morris, the message was clear. This wasn't just about breaking gun laws. It was about stopping weapons before they became tools of mass harm. But even as this pipeline was being shut down, something far larger was already on the move, and it was heading straight for the border. Down in Texas, at one of the busiest border crossings in the country, thousands of trucks roll through every single day. Most of them carry nothing more than ordinary cargo. But on one routine inspection, officers noticed something that didn't feel right. Two tractor trailers were attempting to cross the bridge into Mexico. The paperwork checked out. The drivers looked legitimate, a father and his son, both with legal status, both running what appeared to be a family business. On the surface, they were the last people you'd suspect. Still, agents pulled the rigs aside for a secondary inspection, and that decision changed everything. Hidden inside the trailers were custom-built compartments welded directly into the frame. You could knock on the walls and hear nothing but solid material. No rattling, no gaps. Whoever built them knew exactly what they were doing. When officers finally cracked them open, they found an arsenal. Nearly 400 firearms, thousands of rounds of ammunition, carefully packed, secured, and ready to move. This wasn't a random shipment. It was a resupply run. The mix of weapons told its own story. These weren't meant for collectors or resale at a gun show. They were headed south, straight into cartel territory, where American-made firepower is prized above almost anything else. And the choice of drivers revealed something even more unsettling. This wasn't desperation. It was strategy, using people who blended in, people who wouldn't raise alarms. Proof that these networks aren't just smuggling. They're adapting. But while authorities were still cataloging the weapons in Texas, they realized this shipment wasn't the end of the trail. It was just one layer, and beneath it, something far more elaborate was already in place.
Police have discovered a cache of machine guns and handguns along with $20 million worth of drugs. Detectives say the trailer was allegedly set up as a mobile drug.
While law enforcement was busy intercepting trucks at the border, the cartels weren't slowing down. They were evolving. The CJNG, the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, had been expanding aggressively, moving beyond drugs into violent, high-profit schemes, including crude oil theft from state-owned Pemex. In just 5 days, the DEA launched a nationwide crackdown, hundreds of arrests, massive seizures, over 92 kilograms of fentanyl powder, more than 1 million counterfeit pills, and over 6,000 kilograms of methamphetamine. The numbers were staggering, but again, it was the weapons that told the real story. During the operation, agents recovered 244 firearms. These weren't sidearms for street dealers. They were tools of control, intimidation, and enforcement. Each gun represented a threat to anyone standing in the cartel's way. The government went a step further. The CJNG and other major cartels were officially designated as foreign terrorist organizations. That status wasn't just symbolic, it unlocked new powers for prosecutors, allowing counterterrorism laws to freeze assets and track leaders in ways traditional law enforcement couldn't. Even with these massive busts, the cartels continued to stay ahead. When a pipeline or shipment was disrupted, they didn't stop. They went underground, literally and figuratively. And that's where authorities stumbled onto something that looked like science fiction.
Mexico's most powerful criminal organizations are now expanding their criminal operations into a wide range of violent and high-profit crimes. CJNG and the Gulf Cartel are now directly involved in stealing crude oil from Mexico's state-owned Pemex.
In late June 2025, authorities near Yuma, Arizona uncovered something that looked like it belonged in a movie, not real life. At first, it seemed like a simple tunnel, but calling it a tunnel barely does it justice. This was a half-mile underground highway, stretching nearly 2,900 feet and plunging 50 feet below the surface. What made it extraordinary wasn't just the length. This was a marvel of engineering. Reinforced steel walls, a fully functional ventilation system, pumping in fresh air, high voltage lighting, even a rail system running the entire length, designed to shuttle contraband efficiently from Mexico into the United States. It wasn't a cramped crossbase or a makeshift hole. It was a private subway for the cartel. Investigators spent days mapping it. Every detail spoke to planning, money, and patience. This was an improvisation. It was a calculated operation designed to move goods at a scale and speed most people couldn't imagine. The discovery raised an impossible question. If authorities could find something this advanced advanced, how many other tunnels, secret routes, or hidden networks were operating right under the surface? How many shipments never get caught? For the first time, it became painfully clear. The fight against cartels isn't just on streets, highways, or borders. It's deep underground, in operations built to evade even the most sophisticated enforcement efforts.
Days of excavating revealing a more than 1,300-foot tunnel, a 3 by 4 foot passage complete with water and ventilation, electrical, even a rail system stretching from the Mexico side to a San.
Even after massive busts in Washington, New York, and Texas, authorities knew the problem was far from over. The tunnels, the pipelines, the tractor trailers, they were just pieces of a much larger puzzle. Cartels weren't just smuggling drugs. They were moving firearms, cash, and logistics networks across the country with precision that rivaled corporations. Investigators discovered that many of these guns were purchased legally in American gun shops, then handed off to smugglers. By the time they crossed the border, they were often modified for combat, turning ordinary handguns into deadly, fully automatic weapons. This gray market, invisible to most Americans, had become a critical component in the cartel supply chain. The CJNG and other major organizations weren't waiting for mistakes. They were innovating. Underground tunnels, specialized trucks, and nationwide networks allowed them to stay one step ahead. For law enforcement, every seizure, every arrest was only a partial victory. The network adapted faster than the authorities could respond. And yet, even with these dramatic interventions, the threat remained. What had started with one quiet house in a suburban street revealed a nationwide web of crime that touched cities, borders, highways, and even subterranean passages. One thing became painfully clear. These operations weren't random or sloppy. They were strategic, organized, and prepared to escalate at a moment's notice. The scale, the planning, and the firepower were beyond what most people imagined. And while authorities were making progress, the cartels continued to evolve, showing that this wasn't just a law enforcement issue, it was a systemic challenge that touches every community across the country. From a quiet suburban house in Washington to the tunnels beneath Arizona, from tractor trailers crossing the border to the streets of New York, the story is the same. A network operating in plain sight, moving weapons, drugs, and cash with terrifying efficiency. What began as a single raid revealed an entire system, one that adapts, evolves, and expands faster than authorities can always respond. The reality is uncomfortable. These aren't distant threats. They aren't problems limited to border towns or crime dramas on the news. They're happening in communities, on highways, and beneath our very feet. The cartels are no longer just across the border. They are embedded here, using the tools of modern logistics and human ingenuity to fuel violence and profit. And yet, every seizure, every arrest, every discovery offers a glimpse of hope. The authorities are watching, tracking, and dismantling these networks whenever they can. But the question remains, for every stash found, for every tunnel uncovered, how many more remain hidden? It's a chilling reminder that the fight isn't just out there, it's everywhere. And while most of us go about our daily lives unaware, the battle for safety, control, and survival is happening right under our noses. So, the next time you walk past a quiet street or past a busy highway, remember, sometimes the most dangerous operations are the ones you never see.